Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Dustina. This is Spiritual Boujee Astrology, and we're going to take a look at the major astrological transits for the month of September. Now, one of the things I kept saying throughout the month of August, and I'm going to remind everybody now, I am not running a special in the month of September. You're going to hear me say that a couple times throughout the month. And the reason is what I keep picking up on is I have some prep work to be doing to get ready for the Mars retrograde. And this is me intuitively listening to my stuff and paying attention. Knowing that Mars retrograde is going to be starting in my 10th house of career, I keep hearing like I have to put a couple things in order. And one of those things, for example, because there's a couple things I got to do, is like getting things ready for the website. I've already been working on some of that stuff. But when it comes to like any type of coding aspect, man, I am messed with coding stuff since MySpace. And yes, I just showed my age on that one. I don't really care. And before that, it was middle school. So it's been a minute. So I'm going to have to go through and like learn how to do some things so I can implement them, and to make sure I have the time and the ability to do that. Again, I'm going to have to just have a month, at least a month, where I'm not running any kind of special. All of my prices are going to be listed in the description of every single episode. All of my contact information will be listed in the description of every episode. I will still be taking appointments, but my intuition is telling me I need to have space in some ways to work through certain things. And if you guys would have saw like my DMs and everything through the month of August, guys, like I said, August was going to be messy, but some of that messiness was also like an extra workload. So I'm not as behind as I was, but it's still what it is. I'm a very open person in regards to the things that I'm working on and looking at. And I think most of you guys know that by now. I will still be doing my weekly Zooms every Wednesday night. I will still be taking sessions and bookings. That's not going to be a big deal. But again, I'm not running any type of special pricing for any of this energy because I feel like we're going into something very proactive throughout the month of September. But I want to be clear about this. Proactive, yes, in a lot of ways, proactive. But also, in many ways, for a lot of people, going back to the drawing board. And one of the things I have been saying repeatedly all throughout the second half of the summer is like, look, we have unfinished business in a multitude of areas. We have old triggers that we need to process wounds from. We have old situations that we thought we were done with, but those people, those family members, those things keep coming back full circle. They keep coming back around. They keep coming back into the picture in some way, shape, or form. And by doing that, like we're seeing where we need to again shift and change our focus. I've already kind of explained one of the little things that I'm going to have to do is on a personal level for the business and for the podcast. But each of us have something. We do. I anticipated August being messy because of that Mercury retrograde. Most of that Mercury retrograde was in Leo, and Leo having that fun emphasis of bringing things to light because it's ruled by the sun. I was serious about that. Different things coming to light and getting exposed. And there will be a couple more rounds of things coming to light, getting revealed, having some types of topics coming to the surface in the first 2 weeks of September. And that's because we're starting the month off, one, with a new moon in Virgo in Mercury sign. Two, with Mercury still in shadow. And again, the majority of the shadow is going to be Mercury in Leo. So we still have some final elements and final rounds of things that need to come to light, but the impact of them doesn't feel as detrimental, as harmful, as messy as what we've been through. And if you have something that comes through as harsh or detrimental or something like that, I think that's because you were in the support mode all throughout August, seeing all the shit hit other people, going, wow, that's a lot. And then all of a sudden, the outcome of something falls onto your lap and impacts you. Now, the way you decide to respond to that is your choice. And if you decide to take that negatively or deeply in some negative fashion, or in a frustrating way, or in a way that leads to projection of your feelings, that is a personal choice. But in a lot more ways, it's like once it lands on your plate, once the information comes out, once the results come through, if they haven't already, for some people, the final days of August had results. For a lot more people, the first 10 or so days of September will showcase the results. It will showcase the outcome. But all of it in the outcome is meant to take us back to something. And that literally comes through with the way we start the month. The very first few days of September, we've got a couple things going on. One, Pluto will go back for its final round in Capricorn. From September 1st to November 20th, Pluto will be in Capricorn. Half of that time, he will be retrograde. The other half of that time, he will be direct. And this will be the one and done. We are finally wrapping that thing up. But knowing we have something tangible, hardy, physical in many, many ways that we need to go back and revise, revamp, restructure, redo. We need to go put our focus somewhere or with someone or in some place. It has a purpose. And you will see different themes of people having to go back somewhere that they didn't think that they needed to handle anymore, that they didn't think was going to be a bother anymore, that they didn't think was going to be on their plate anymore. But it is. And even if you have thought, I'm healed, I'm done, I'm fine, that doesn't mean the people you cut off healed and did fine. We've all lived lives since whatever separation you could be thinking about, talking about, working through. And there will be these rounds of energy towards unfinished chapters. And I do mean chapters. Pluto started to come into Capricorn between 2007 and 2009, the rounds of the back and forth and all that. A lot of people will remember that time frame. We had a lot of things in a financial crisis and a housing market crisis and everything else. Oh, wait, aren't we still? Yeah, that's because we still have final rounds of Pluto in Capricorn. And for those that don't know, the United States has a natal chart. It is known as the Sibley chart, Sibley, Sibley chart. And Capricorn rules the United States chart, second house of money. Sorry, I went goofy just there for a second. Sorry. Revamp. There is emphasis as to why we're having so many issues as a country when it comes to finances and money. But that's going to change soon. It's going to change because we need to have new rules, new regulations, and new things coming through. But that's big picture. I don't usually go into big picture stuff whenever it comes to this. I usually try to keep it more mundane in what we're doing in our daily life. There's something we got to go back and deal with. Now, for some people, it's going to be very easy stuff. You got to sell the family farm. Why do I say family farm? Because Pluto in Capricorn is Capricorn is an earth sign. We have to sell the family farm. We have to change something in our business. We have to restructure something that gives us power. We have to end a power struggle because that dynamic cannot go with us into the new cycle. And as a collective, 2025 and 2026 is definitely the start of a new cycle. And these last few years of shaking everybody out of their ruts were very, very necessary because some people were deeply ingrained into their rut. It was like a bunker. It had layers and levels. It was a huge basement 4-story down. They were so stuck in their rut. But since 2020, we've had hit upon hit upon hit, showing us that's not a safe bunker. That's not a safe hole. You can't stay in your rut. There have been shakeups. Pluto going back into Capricorn will have one final round of shakeups, but I don't mean this in the messy sense or that whole timeline of July of whenever I was saying, like, look, there's a frequency shift going on right here. We've already shifted. But that shift forward has also showed us we can't go any more forward. We have to take a step back, take a side step, do something a little old so then we can come back to the new. And by the time we get into like November, December, we are really going to be into something new in a lot of ways. When we get into the first parts of 2025, we will really be into the new in a lot more ways. And I'm not getting into all that. But we have things that speak to going back to something old. Now, the day Pluto goes back into Capricorn, Uranus will turn retrograde. And what's peculiar about that is, well, Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, where Pluto has been. So not everybody knows what they're going back towards. They haven't had the call. They haven't had the hiccup. They haven't had the revelation. They haven't had something come to light quite yet. At the time that I'm recording this, it's gonna come through in that first week of September. Again, we've still got some final rounds of information coming to light and getting revealed. Uranus is the liberator. Break from the mold, break from traditions, break away from an old thing. And this is why I keep giving examples along the lines of selling the family farm. The family farm, that's a tradition thing. Grandpa had it and his dad had it and your dad had it and it's supposed to go to you, but you have no desire for it. I know that's kind of backwards. A lot of people actually do have the desire for the farm life right now, and I get that, but go with me for my metaphors and my analogies. They have a purpose and they have a meaning. The old way of doing things, the old dynamic, the old traditions cannot remain. The old positions of power, the old struggles cannot remain. They're holding us back. You could sell the family farm to go buy a new farm in a new state. That's a big possibility because you want a clean slate. You don't want to carry all of that generational trauma. You want something that is your own. Many of us do. But before we can go into that new thing that is our own, we got to clean up an old mess. And it really kind of comes down to what Aquarius rules for you and what Uranus rules for you. Now, the last full moon that we had in the month of August was the full moon in Aquarius. What has changed for you since that full moon? That's going to give you more indicators as to what starts to shift once Uranus goes retrograde. And what I started to say then is like, look, we're going to have something that we were excited about before, we were supportive of before, and we will get to a point that some of us in the very first week of September, we're not as supportive of, we're not as excited about, we're not feeling the same way. It's not jiving anymore. And it's another layer that speaks to we have to take a step back. We have to take a sidestep. We have to go back to the drawing board. We have to revise our plans. We have to close out something from the past. I've been saying we have unfinished business for months. Mercury's retrograde and Mars going over its shadow points in Gemini, Venus doing everything she has done through Leo and Virgo. All of that was to bring back that old information and again to show us the truth that we thought we knew, the facts that we thought we had at hand, the information that we thought was real and tangible. Something about it has changed. Now, there are layers to how that has manifested for many, many people, but a lot of us, and you know it's true because you've DM'd me about it, even if you haven't had a session, you have DM'd me about it going, yeah, so that thing, the theme, the old stuff, it came back. Yeah, I'm sure it did. That old person, they came back. I ran into him. It wasn't unexpected, but it happened. And I felt like there should be more there, but there wasn't ready to talk about more. Like, I get it. It wasn't time. You weren't ready. I get it. There's a reason it wasn't the right time. There is a reason you weren't ready. There's a reason why you just had one message from the old person, but then after you responded, there was no more. Or when you saw the old message, you didn't respond, but you didn't block them either. You're just like, oh, why are they messaging me? I'm gonna put that down. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to work with that. I don't want to focus on that. I don't have the capacity for that one right now because we didn't. Had too much going on. Capacity levels will change. Are we all going to start DMing the old person throughout the month of September? Not necessarily. That can be something that's later, but it's more like we're shifting our focus to squashing some old situation or some old dynamic. And it's going to bring up a lot of unresolved emotions. And why do I say that? On September 4th, Mars will enter Cancer for the first time. And to be clear, when it comes to the next year, just going to say a year, from September to next summer, just saying it that way, the majority of where Mars is going to be for the next year is going to be Cancer and Leo. The first part we're going to talk about right now is Cancer. And for the next 2 months, from September 4th to November 2nd, Mars is going to be in Cancer. Now, Mars is the god of war. He is the disruptor in many, many ways. Acts and actions and reactions and determination and drive going into Cancer. Emotions, mothers, womb. And the timeline of Mars going through Cancer, all of the timelines, not just the first one, not just the first one, the whole timeline. This direct phase, the future retrograde phase, then when Mars goes direct and go, I'm really stating a very lengthy timeline here. The stirring up of emotions can bring up mother wounds. The stirring up of emotions can bring forth actions and reactions towards mothers. I'm going to say that as YouTube, Spotify friendly as possible. The god of war has weapons. He's not playing instruments. He uses weapons. Put that together yourself. Okay, keep going, keep going. The things that come to light, the things that take us back to that old situation and that old dynamic is going to have emotional reactions. For some people, it's going to be the deep-seated wounds and the deep-seated emotions. For a lot of other people, it's going to be raw, new emotions because you are going to start to realize some of the newer things that you have done. You've done it with the wrong person. And even if you're not the one responding emotionally at the moment, they could be. I wasn't ready for this. We moved too fast. We shouldn't have moved in together after dating for 2 months. We shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't have done that. We got married too soon. We just started dating. Now I'm pregnant. And there's going to be these rounds of flooded emotions that come to the surface and come to light all throughout the month of September. Trickle, 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 emotions, emotions, emotions. And if you do not have a good place to put your energy, to put your focus, Mars in Cancer is going to suck. As a natal Mars in Cancer, taking my advice, if you do not have a good place to put your energy, it's going to suck. Have projects. The thing about Mars is he's not at war all the time. He's not in destructive mode all the time. And if we're not tearing down the walls, breaking down the barriers, going into war, I mean it that way, then we need to have another place to put that armory and that will. And this is why I'm saying you need to have projects. Finish the stuff around the house. Do different things outside in the woodshop if you can. Go join a jujitsu class if you can. Look up like free yoga stuff in your area. You can usually find stuff, but you need to have a place to physically put that energy and work through the wounds that come to the surface all throughout the month of September. And again, Mars in Cancer starts on September 4th. Now, the thing about Mars in Cancer is we've dealt with this before. It's not the first time. It is the layers of what can happen. And a lot of people will have emotional disruptions within their family, within their home life. And a lot of people that started new things earlier this year, I'm telling you, they're not going to feel the same way anymore. There's going to be a lot of people that are like, they don't trust it the same. They don't feel like they're being respected. And you will see different rounds of how that will manifest and come through. But this isn't the only marker that speaks to emotions and speaks to what we need to do to heal. And this takes me into what's going to happen in the middle of the month. September 17th, we are going to have an out of sign eclipse in the sign of Pisces, a full moon eclipse. Now, it will not be a big spectacle eclipse for us here in the States, like what we had earlier this year and what everybody was talking about. No, no, no. But just because you can't see the eclipse from your location does not mean that you don't get hit with the eclipse energy. It's still going to happen. Even if a full moon is happening in the daylight, does not mean that you don't get hit with the full moon energy. It's still going to happen. Now, the thing about eclipses that happen is they usually are a lunation, new moon or full moon, doesn't really matter, that happens within 15 degrees of the nodes. The North Node is not in Pisces, and it will not enter Pisces until January. It's in Aries still. The full moon in Pisces will be within that 15-degree mark. The full moon in Aries that we have in October will not. When we have an eclipse happen before the node changes signs, it usually is something that instigates shaking up an area to make space. Well, the thing about that is the fact that Pisces is another water sign. This one, though, in specific, has to do with healing and aging. There are things that it's going to be tied to our elders that are going to get spurred up. Specifically now, the feminine elders, because Mars will be in Cancer. We got to pay attention to what's going on with our moms and our grandmas, our aunties. Be aware of that. There can be something that happens in that mid-month full moon that brings a lot of emotions to the surface. And the changes of what's going on around you can make some elements of the energy around you feel almost uncontrollable. I can't do anything with this. I can't handle this change. I can't handle what's going on. And the emotions are just flooding through, and you're crying. But you're also confused. And the reason you're confused is because that full moon will loosely be in a square to Jupiter, will be past the full Sun Jupiter square. It will loosely be in a conjunction to Neptune. And again, it's an eclipse happening in a sign before the actual node changes signs. Many people will go through that eclipse and be blindsided by what comes through and who comes through and what changes and what happens. The emotions will flood. I can't stress that enough. And for some people, given now that Pluto's back in Capricorn, and Pluto will also be in a sextile to that full moon, so he's having an impact a little bit. When it comes to that part of the energy, some of us, what we have to go back and deal with, where we are resolving unfinished business, where we are having to change tangibly the structured element of responsibility and the power struggles that be, it will also have an impact to the things that are coming through, because some of the new things that come through, the new emotions coming through, the new knowledge that comes through, the new dynamic that comes through, we won't even realize how deeply it's going to impact us until we're in that moment. And some people will literally be mid-month going, I don't know why I can't stop crying. What is wrong with me? You're going to feel it. You're going to know. Now, the thing about Pisces is it's also a sign about healing. And one of the reasons so many of us need to go handle unfinished business is because we need to heal those wounds, heal the trauma from our parents, heal the trauma from old loved ones, heal the loss of children, heal the loss of a loved one, heal from something so deeply that words cannot express it. And once the floodgates are open, it will make us even more aware of what we need to start to do different to reach balance. Now, we only have one eclipse in the month of September, and I'm a firm believer that whatever lunation starts eclipse season is the one that ends it. What does that mean? That means the full moon in Pisces starts eclipse season, but in my opinion, eclipse season will not end until the full moon in Aries. Now, the thing about the Mercury retrograde we just had is Mercury will not leave shadow until September 12th. And I said this back in my Mercury retrograde video back in July. Mercury will leave shadow, stop going over areas of the sky that he's already been on September 12th. September 17th, 5 days later, we go into eclipse season. There were direct things from that Mercury retrograde, direct things that are now impacting eclipse season. Now, not all of us had an easy visual of understanding how that connection was going to be made. But as we continue throughout the first 2 weeks of the month, we're going to start to see it. We're going to start. It's not going to be what we anticipate. It's not going to be what we expected, but it's going to be a necessary moment in regards to understanding something. Because again, a truth that we used to know, that we thought was real, that we thought was true, we're going to learn is not the truth that we thought it was. It's not what we thought it was. It's not as real as we thought it was. That there were other dynamics that we weren't privy to at the time. There's a reason mom left home at that age. There's a reason grandpa and grandma could never get along. There's a reason your dad hated your grandpa. There's a reason for all of it. And for a lot of people, as we go into eclipse season, those truths need to come out. So again, we can take the steps to heal. So we can end the old dynamic. So we can end a power struggle that we didn't even realize we were still in. But we are. We have been. We took full steam ahead thinking that we could just leave it all behind us. But little bits will come back around, pushing us to go deal with something, to go rethink something, to go revise something, to go do something differently. And a lot of the energy since especially that second full moon in Capricorn, but just the full moons in Capricorn. So a lot of the energy of the summer, it's been edging us in that direction the whole time. We just couldn't always see the writing on the wall, but it was there the whole time. I've said that before. I'm saying it again now, and I will say it again later. The writing has been on the wall for a while. Oh, there will be things that change in our responsibilities. There will be role shifts that need to happen. In many ways, we've already seen that in big picture ways. I don't know how many of you follow the news the way I do, but in the year of 2024, there has been more CEO, COO, and CFO changes in companies than any year before. It's like a record change of all of these different managers going, okay, I'm done. Or getting voted out by their boards. And I'm using this as an example, as a role and responsibility. People have no longer had votes of confidence in the people that have been in charge. And that again is because certain roles and responsibilities have needed to change. We had some elements of these themes within our families and that dynamic last fall. And I'm saying we're going to continue to see more of it as we go through this year. The old guys retire. The old ladies are bringing in new people, new fresh blood, where we got to do something different. And I'm using that big picture mundane aspect again to also dumb it down to what we're dealing with in our home lives and what we're dealing with our families. The family elder that has always been there, grandma, grandpa, uncle, auntie, doesn't matter, they're not going to remain the same. The dynamic is shifting. New traditions must be built, new responsibilities, new roles within the family. There is a dynamic that is shifting. And as we go through parts of September and October and November, we'll see that more and more in the mundane sense, in the family sense. Some of you, you just lost a family member and you don't realize what those first holidays are going to be like. But we start to make plans for those, at least the ones taking on the new roles, early. And the first elements of that will start to come through. The first steps of that will start to come through. Your role in many ways is going to change. And the power dynamic of the old will be far more awake, aware, and prominent, little by little. And the way we get to new levels of progress is by accepting the old and the new, revising the old and bringing it into the new, ending the sidestep by learning accommodation. You can't completely erase your history, because when you erase history, then you're showing that you're not learning from the past. You're not learning from history. You're not learning from your experiences. And for us to understand where we're going next, we need to take the lessons from before, from that old relationship, from the old dynamic within our families, from the old company, from the old business partner, from the old experiences, from the old lessons, from the old teachings, whatever it was, and we apply it to something new now. And experience, outside of the box experience especially, can speak volumes when you take those old dynamics and you take that old structure, when you take that old experience and you start to apply it to something new. Well, who taught you how to do that? My grandpa did. Your grandpa was a mechanic? No, he was a farmer. But I've used those tools before. I've used that stuff before. I've wrote that code before. I've done this before, just in a different way. I had no idea. I never thought I'd use it again. Never thought I'd do this again. Never thought I would try this again. Never thought. But there is a dynamic that needs to shift. The shift is coming. I don't want to say that there's going to be a big shift in September, because I don't feel like there is. But I feel like there's a bit of a sidestep for progress. And I feel like there's something about old and unfinished business and old and unfinished dynamics and old ways of doing things that we have to revisit, tap back into, finally get closure for some people, regain knowledge for other people, tie a nice little bow around it so that way we can take what we need with us moving forward into new industries, into new dynamics, into new relationships, into new partnerships, into new roles, into our new responsibilities. And I feel like before we can go into that new completely, there are elements of the unfinished business. There are elements of going back to the past. There are elements of ending that power struggle, finally learning the truth about something, finally, finding that old portfolio, that old book, those old receipts, that old knowledge, those old reports. And it's like reading an old thing with fresh eyes. And you're like, wait a minute. That's not what I remember. That's not how I remember this. That's not what I believed. That's not what I thought was happening. And you've heard of things like this before. You have an older sibling that left the family when you were young, but come to find out it wasn't a sibling at all. The person that you thought was your mother or your brother was actually your father, your mother. the people that you've known to be your parents, using this as a very old school farm example, but it's the truth. The people that you knew to be your parents were actually your grandparents the entire time, but nobody told you. But by going back and rereading your birth certificate, by going back and reading the will or reading something else, you find additional clues. And it enlightens you. And it shows you again, the truth that you thought you knew was not the truth that actually was there. And if you take a long moment to think long and hard about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like, oh, well, I don't even look like my parents. I look like somebody else. I never put two and two together. Why is that? Why couldn't I see this sooner? Why didn't I recognize this sooner? Why didn't I realize? And again, there are times that when we do things in our life, when you are too close to the situation, you're too close. You can't see the big picture. You can't see the full dynamic. You can't see the real world examples. You can't see past your freaking face. You can't. Taking the step back is necessary. Taking the side step to go revisit something is necessary. Taking a different approach is going to be necessary because we need to pull something from the past, someone from the past, to gain closure, to revisit lessons. And there's a lot of this energy that speaks to the old is necessary to be brought into the new. That final round of knowledge is going to be so necessary to take us into what's going forward, into where we're going next. Those old experiences can speak volumes in the new ways that you apply them. And we can see that as we go through the month of September. And as much as I want to say there's full progression, I don't think that there is. I think a lot of people, by going back to something old, it's like we're going back to the drawing board. And we need something in that revisiting, in that revamping, in that restructuring, in that repurpose type of situation to prepare us for what progress will look like. We need that old book of grandma's, all those old recipes. Like, oh my God, I didn't think I'd ever have this food again. Never thought I'd be able to do this again. But it's like you get that thing and it's like, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to recreate it the way that she used to do it. But on top of that, I'm going to make it a little bit more keto friendly. Make it a little bit more gluten free. Like I'm going to do something with these old recipes, with this old knowledge, with this old dynamic, with these old tools. I'm going to reshape it, repurpose, and revamp it and bring it into my current structure and my current purpose. If you have a side step, a side quest, depending on the words you like, a revisiting of the old that comes through somewhere in September, that is necessary for you. And it will be different times for everybody. But it's necessary. For some people, you're not going back to the family farm. I'm stuck on family farm for some reason because it's Pluto and Capricorn. So I apologize for that. And it's Mars and Cancer. When we get into these Capricorn Cancer things, especially the Cancer side, like I picture the family farm. I picture, wide open spaces. And I picture that element of like earth nurturing. And this is why I always go to family farm. We got to disrupt the family. We got to disrupt the farm. And some of you are going to be able to finally cut ties with something or someone in the last parts of this year. And you're going to finally have some levels of closure. For others of you, you're going to learn some level of truth that you never thought could possibly be real, never even considered it. And it's going to change your progression. And I don't mean this in the negative sense. But we need the sidestep. We need to go back to the drawing board. We need to go do something else. So that way other people can understand your truth just as much as you need to understand their truth. And I know I'm saying the word truth. It's not always about truth. Sometimes it's the knowledge base. Like you have to go back and learn something from your dad or from your brother or from somebody like, oh, I remember dad always doing this. It's like, yeah, he taught me. I thought he taught you. No, he never taught me. Well, let me show you what dad used to do with me. And this is how we fix this part of an old car. This is how we're going to fix this old machine. And if you use this machine right, you can use it in this other way. I'm like, oh my God, I never knew. But I'm stuck on these physical things because I do know as we go into parts of 2025 and 2026, so many of us are going into new industries, but we disregard old mechanics and old tools. And that's really not a good thing because then we forget. It was very normal for people in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s to change their own oil. I'm just using this as an example now. You know me and my analogies, guys. It was very normal back in those days to change your own oil. You didn't take it to a mechanic. Nowadays, 90% of the people, whenever they change their oil, they take it to a dude. They take it to a shop. They delegate it. They pay for someone else to do it. There's been such a big dynamic role reversal. But eventually, we do things to save money. And by learning an old skill, an old trade, an old way of doing things, we can create another path, or that knowledge base allows us to understand something else deeper in the mechanics of something. So the side step, again, the drawing board, going back to the drawing board, it's all very necessary. But whatever we're dealing with in September, it's not like Mercury retrograde, old revisiting. If you have an ex coming back around during the Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, that is a final lesson in trauma, a final lesson in abuse, a final lesson in power struggles. And that is the most specific to Capricorn risings, Libra risings, Aries risings, and Cancer risings, especially Cancer risings. But for a lot of other people, Pluto and Capricorn has nothing to do with that. And it's going to be something else. But there is something that we're going back. And even if it's not something that you knew before, it's like you're learning an old way of doing things. But once you learn the mechanics of it, you're like, wait, this is similar to this. And it's like you can apply it to something else. Are you going to apply it immediately? Maybe. A lot of you, not really. It's going to happen later. But we have to go back to something. We need it. Whether that's for emotional closure, whether that is for our mental health, whether it's that way we don't progress in, sharing our traumas and projecting them onto our kids and the next generations, whatever it is, there's a need for that last revisiting. And we'll see elements of this through September and October, the majority of it. But the first rounds is taking us back. And that's why I'm saying September is a lot about going back to the drawing board. Okay. Let's get into the transits. Now, again, if you've never seen a month ahead forecast with me, that is okay. The way I look at this is I'm only doing the major transits. If you want to know like the hour by hour stuff and when the moon's doing the what to this, to that, to the other, that's what the weekly forecasts are for. This is to give you the major dates so that way you are prepared for whenever things are kind of popping up. And if they're going to be real big, I'll say that. If I feel like they're going to be like mundane things, I say that too. I just want you guys to be prepared and understanding the dynamics of how to read the energy when you're in the moments. So first things first, September 1st at 10:18 a.m. Central Standard Time, Uranus turned retrograde. At this moment, I have it at 12:30 in the afternoon. So Uranus is already retrograde at this point. A few hours after this, specifically at 6:58 p.m. Central Standard Time. Oh, I did this by date. Go back to hour. My bad. Take this to 7:30. Boom. Pluto is back in Capricorn. For us here in the States, the first few days of September is a holiday weekend. And many of us, whenever it comes to a long weekend, we go out of town. A lot of times we go back home or we go to a family event. We do something. Don't be surprised if wherever you're going throughout August 30th, 31st, September 1st and 2nd, whatever this timeline is for you, is whenever you go back to something or someone, we start to talk about a decision that's going to take us backwards. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. Throughout the first, the moon will actually make a conjunction to Mercury this day. I know I said I wouldn't do all the moon stuff, and I'm not going to, but there's levels to this. The moon will make a conjunction to Mercury, a newly direct Mercury. And there's something about the information, there's something about a decision that needs to be exchanged. And by the time we get to the second, I'm just going to go ahead and bump this one day, we're actually going to be in the new moon in Virgo. You can see it's almost perfected here. So the new moon will actually be the most exact between 8:55 p.m. and 9 o'clock. So 8:55 is what I've got. That's when the new moon in Virgo is exact. But you can see it pretty close right here. Many of us are coming to terms that we need to go back somewhere, that again, we're going back to the drawing board. We know a decision or an outcome that's about to come to light is going to force us back into something. It's going to make us revisit something, or we get some kind of communication or news these first few days of the month that again shifts our focus back to something, because now Pluto is back in Capricorn. That Mercury retrograde brought a lot of things to light, brought a lot of things to the surface, things that weren't a part of the original agenda. And there will be some type of action that gets decided on in this energy. Now, I'm still sticking with the fourth, I'm sorry, not the fourth, the second. Now I am going to bump it by hour. And I want to get to right around 11 p.m. So at 11:30, that's close enough. What we got right here is Neptune in a square, so 90-degree angles to Mars. Neptune, it is illusion, it is delusion, it is nostalgia. For this conversation, I want to stick with nostalgia. Something from the past, someone from the past. An area that has had confusion to it. Now, for some people, this is going to have a symptom related to it. Whenever it comes to Neptune's energies, sometimes it's spiritual, sometimes it's illusion, delusion. Sometimes it's the things that like cloud our senses, but clouding our sentiments could be like, I want to binge watch all of the Lord of the Rings movies for, 24 hours straight, or I don't even know if you can do those in 24 hours, but go with me on that. Or I have some type of symptom that's creating a reaction. Now, for sometimes symptom can actually have to do with medicines or substances. And the influence of a substance can now have an action or a reaction based off of the square to Mars. And that comes through right here. So the actual square happens right around that 29-degree mark. You can see this here, like they're right on top of each other. Whenever this happens, it goes the most exact between 10:33 and 11:12 p.m. So there can be something here that speaks to substances. It can speak to lies, deception, fraud. That's a big possibility. Or we could be very aware, again, because of the information that was brought to light in recent weeks based off of the Mercury retrograde messiness of August, because it was messy, that we now have to take actions that we didn't think we were going to have to take before. We thought we were going in a different direction. We thought we had other things handled. And now we're in this energy and we're taking new steps forward. And for a lot of people, these new steps forward are going to have a lot of emotions tied to them, especially if you're leaving your boyfriend, you're leaving your girlfriend, you're leaving to go somewhere, or you got that call about grandpa that's making you go back somewhere. Whatever is coming to light around this time, there's a lot of logic and information in the first few days of September, but then there's also going to be things that lead to those emotions. And now this takes me into the third. I'm going to go and bump this just by day, not by hour. And on the third, Venus will make a conjunction to the south node. Mars is at 29 degrees of Gemini. Hear me out on this one. Anytime we have planets that are stuck at 29, which we have both Mars and Pluto stuck at 29, and they're in a quincunx to each other, they're not seeing eye to eye. The action that we take, we don't want to do. We're not wanting to deal with. We didn't expect it coming because of that quincunx. But Venus is hitting the conjunction to the South Node. Now, Venus is in Libra. She rules Libra. And this will be the first planet that hits the South Node on our way to eclipse season. And she is the ruler of one of the two eclipses, specifically the one that's going to happen a month from now on October 2nd. But she's still one of the rulers. Venus, whenever it comes to her energy, it is love. It can have to do with karma and past life connections. It can have to do with healing and the things that we need to relieve because of her conjunction to the South Node. But the South Node in Vedic astrology, it is the body of the dragon that has been discarded, removed, replaced, outgrown. Many people can make the decision to leave something or someone behind in the first few days of September because we have outgrown a situation. We can leave based off of the impact that has come to light, that has come to the surface, that has been revealed. There can also be something that impacts the body when Venus hits the conjunction to the South Node. Now, I want to say Venus is going to be great because she's going to be all healing. Let's do something really good. The problem I'm having with this is Venus has not always done the greatest things, especially since the South Node has been in Libra, in my opinion. A lot of her dynamic has switched with Mars for some reason. And I've seen that repeatedly since this has gone on. And then that's been since July of 2023. Okay. When it comes to the body, Venus rules your mouth and your senses, everything that we do to take in food and anything that we use to project those sultry voices. Now, whenever it comes to communication, that's a Mercury thing. But whenever it comes to the areas around the mouth and what we're using it for, that's a Venus thing. Things that give us pleasure. The thyroid, their throat, and all this goes into Venus. Whenever it comes into your lungs, we're getting into Venus. Whenever it comes to your female sexual organs, we're getting into Venus stuff. Kidneys are Venus. There can be things, symptoms for some people that happen in the first few days of the month. I'm adding the layers to this that impact a body, specifically females or people that are going through Venus activations, like Venus is your chart ruler or Venus is your time lord. So be aware of that. There can be things about the awareness of the body, but there can also be things that we want to change about the body. It might not be anything cute, super big. It's just like, you know what? I'm going to get off of sugar because that's the substance that we want to get rid of. And I'm going to start doing all of these different things to take care of my body differently. I want to love my body. And that can also be a way that we start to deal with the energy in the beginning of September. The idea, the decision, the information of the very last few days of August to the very first few days of September are important. And for some people, they're going to be like the big things, like I described in the intro, or they're going to be all internalized. And we're going to make certain decisions to not do something the same way anymore, to not cook the same way, to not do the same things, to not be in the same mentality as what we were before, and to do something different with the idea that it's going to positively impact our body. That can be a big part of this too. Now, the next day, September 4th at 2:46 p.m. Central Standard Time, Mars is going to enter Cancer. And this is right when the moon is also making the conjunction to the South Node and Venus. So the internalized energy for some people is now going to have an audience. It's now going to have an extra person. I have decided I'm going to go back to the gym. Oh my God, I'll go to the gym with you. I'll walk with you. I'll go do those things with you. And that's in the mundane sense. For other people, this is going to be an arrival, or an arrival to a place from the past, an arrival of someone that we could have a karmic connection with. It's not a joke because of the South Node energy. It's really not a joke. Or, an arrival of some place that we didn't want to go. There is an arrival in many, many ways that comes through on September 4th. A new person comes in the office, new person shows up at your house, new person in your DMs, new legal thing for some people, because like all the paperwork's been going, but now we're getting closer to the outcome, and it's going to have a disruptive energy because Mars is now in Cancer. Okay. Okay. We're going to bump this now to September 6th. And on the 6th, this is when we're going to have the final Uranus square to Mercury. Now, we've had two others. One was on July 21st, and that was actually during the full moon in Capricorn number 2. And the other one was August 18th, which was immediately before the Aquarius full moons. So what I was saying before is like, look, some of the stuff from those previous full moons are leading into what we're doing with right now. Hey, look, here's one of those little markers that says that. Mercury square to Uranus. Now, the first Mercury Uranus square also had Mars involved. And Mars is not completely off the hook with his part of the transit right now. So part of the information that has come to light, part of the truth in certain situations, part of the outcomes in a lot of situations are going to hit some people very, very unexpectedly. And this dynamic is different compared to the first two. Now, the first one, Uranus was direct, Mercury was direct. Number two, Mercury was retrograde, Uranus was retrograde. So we had a change in information there. And that Mercury, second Mercury Uranus square included Mercury cazimi, so information coming to light. And also there was the full moon in Aquarius, which Uranus ruled. So there was a big dynamic shift of the information. And a lot of people, even if you didn't have something in that moment, the vibration around that full moon in Aquarius was very, very real. And some people will finally learn an outcome right here in the third and final Mercury Uranus conjunction. But now Uranus is retrograde. So the excitement and the support of something that we had once before has fell away. We don't have it the same. Many people knew that going into the beginning of the month. Some people, you're not learning that until right here. Yeah, we're not going to be able to move forward with this. Yeah, we're not going to be able to support this anymore. Yeah, we're not feeling this the same way. I don't know. We're going in a different direction. We've changed our minds. We're going to wait till springtime, something along these lines. There can be the evidence of a delay. And remember, delays are necessary right now because we have to go back to the drawing board. And this delay can be a part of what's sending us back to the drawing board. Okay. Now, Mercury square to Uranus, it goes exact at 11:30 p.m. So you can actually see this right here, right around 11:30. So we have 27 degrees, 14 minutes, 27 degrees, 50 minutes. That means the human effect is Mercury square Uranus can play out for you on either the 6th, when it is exact, or the 7th, because that's not exact for you on the 6th so much as it is the 7th. This goes now based off time zones. For me, it is 11:30 at night on the 6th. So the human effect is a lot more people are going to be dealing with on the 7th. Okay, moving along. Speaking of the 7th, let's go ahead and bump that today. We're going to go to the 7th. And that is when we get the exact opposition between the sun and Saturn. Saturn, the other ruler of Aquarius, Saturn, where Pluto has newly retrograded back into, the ruler of karma, government, laws in a lot of different ways, not the enforcement of laws, but the laws that are being made in new jurisdiction, roles, responsibilities, the elders, the authority figure. Some of us are going to be sitting down with our boss around this time. Some of us, like, this is when we're getting the outcome of something. There's layers to when certain outcomes can come through, and you can have multiple outcomes coming through in the first few days of September, not just one and done, especially because most of us don't just have one situation going on in our life. We got a lot of things going on. So be aware of that. But this is sitting down, talking about old responsibilities, the old role, the old way of doing things. Some of us, we're going to be presenting something to a boss to change their mind, presenting something to grandpa to change their mind. Or it's because grandpa, the boss, or somebody else has already changed their mind and they're sitting your ass down, letting you know, hey, this ain't going to go the same way. We're making a change. It's not going to be the same way. We're making a change. So be aware of that, this encounter, this meeting, this conversation that we're having. Okay, moving along. We're going to bump this a couple days until the 11th. Now, At 10:30 p.m., so you notice I'm doing all this stuff really late in the evening, so I'm bumped that to 10:30. It's just an hour. This is when we get the third and final sextile between Mars and Mercury. So we got Mars here, 4 degrees, 21 minutes. Here's Mercury, 4 degrees, 20 minutes. What's interesting about this is the first one of these actually happened during the first full moon in Capricorn. Oh, look, I said it again. The previous full moons that we've had over the course of the summer are impacting now. Even if we didn't realize back then, the things that were going on were going to impact so much later. This is another part of that. This will be again, the third and final. The two previous sextiles between Mars and Mercury, June 21st, the first full moon in Capricorn, and the other one was August 23rd, immediately following that full moon in Aquarius. Full moon, full moon. Those changes in responsibility, those changes in the roles, the changes in the boss, the changes in the mechanics and the authority figures, the changes within the hierarchy, the changes within the family, whatever these have been for you, now have some type of momentum that can start to kick in. But again, we have some of this energy that speaks to old dynamics and unfinished business. So there are things that we're going to start to see that is the mix of both. We can make progress in one or two areas, but it's not going to be in all areas. The other thing that's happening right as Mercury and Mars go through this sextile, and I did cover this back in the full moon, not full moon, the Mercury retrograde video I did in July, is this is also when Mercury is leaving shadow, specifically right after midnight on the 12th. Mercury leaving shadow means whatever topics we've been dealing with since mid-July, we're finally moving past them. We're finally moving on. And this is why I'm saying in some levels we'll have progress, but in other levels we're going to have the side quest, the side step. We're going to have to go back to the drawing board on something. So there's elements of both, but this one here has a progress element. Now, the very next day, early in the morning, so we're just going to keep going to this. Again, Mercury's leaving shadow, and then we get into the early morning, and what do we have here? Jupiter in its exact square with the sun. Now, Jupiter is being hosted by Mercury. And one of the things that I said back in that middle part of July is both Mercury and Jupiter were entering shadow at the same time. And there will be elements of the things that we were dealing with in July that we will still be dealing with next spring. It's just going to be additional layers to it. There's going to be more info to it. There'll be more dynamics to it. Some of the decisions that we made in July, thinking that everything was going to be fine and dandy, we're going to get elements of it that kind of hit a shock to the system that make us realize, oh, we can't go much further. And there's something here where we realize, oh, we're going to have to make a dynamic change. Hey, the funding's a little bit different. Hey, what we thought was going to be the case, we're not going to be able to make fit the same way. And Jupiter square to the sun can be kind of a shock to the system. Now, Jupiter, it is the doctor, it is the guru, it is the teacher. There are lessons. There's a prestige element whenever it comes to Jupiter, but there's also a prestige element when it comes to the sun. And the changes of the truth, the changes of information, the things that have been brought to light in so many different ways are going to be expressed in this area. And many people are going to be asking for guidance of how to move forward. You didn't have a great meeting with the boss the few days sooner. And now you're like, okay, do I stay in this job or do I go in a different direction? I don't know. Maybe you should go look at some of the things that you used to do. Maybe we should take a step back. Maybe we should go back to the drawing board. Please see the continuance of the themes in this moment. It's like sometimes you have to re-strategize your game plan, buddy. And Jupiter square to the sun can be this, the dynamic that speaks to changing up part of the plans. And that can be a lesson, that can be the forward guidance that is expressed in this moment whenever Jupiter makes the square to the sun. In other ways, it can be a judgment when Jupiter hits the square to the sun. So be aware of that. Okay. 2 days later, on the 15th, Jupiter is going to hit a trine to Venus. This is air to air, voicing to voicing. On this same day, the moon is going to be in Aquarius, and at some point in the day, the moon will actually hit a trine also. We'll have what's known as a grand trine. That means we're going to have the full triangle of the new information, Jupiter and Gemini, that needs to be expressed moving forward, Venus in Libra, that's going to have a long-term effect. The moon in Aquarius. Hey, big news, big news. This is coming in the future. This is coming later. We're making a decision. We're changing something in our goals. We're changing something in the moment. We're doing something. And whatever we start to talk about is in an outcome situation or the new dynamic situation, however this part is going to go. The news that is breaking might also be something else that speaks to that level of emotion and the emotional reactions that are going to come through and the kinds of emotions that will follow. Now, why do I say that? Because this is the 15th, and if I bump this 2 more days to the 17th, we get later in the evening, we're going to have our full moon in Pisces. So I got this roughly about 9:30 at night. The full moon is going to perfect a little bit after this, so between 9:30 and 10. But we've got the moon, 25 degrees, 37 minutes. Here is the sun, 25 degrees, 40 minutes. So it's close enough for government work. Again, this is a full moon, very close to Neptune. This is a full moon that is happening in the sign before the node changes sign. So it is an out of sign eclipse. It is in a loose sextile to Pluto. It is in a loose sextile to Uranus. So there can be very much an expect the unexpected thing here, but this is also a full moon in Pisces, something that gets announced in the days before, some kind of outcome that comes through in the days before, some type of information in the days before can equal something that results in either major healing, full moon in Pisces, or major emotional reactions, full moon in Pisces. Floodgates are open. Things are just pouring through, things that we need to work through, things that we need to heal. And again, Pluto in this energy back in Capricorn speaks to that also. So there's a reason these things are coming to the surface and coming to light. There's a reason for all of it. Now, the North Node will not enter Pisces until January of 2025. So this is shaking up an area and making space in an area that's not completely activated yet. So I'm sticking with the term of making space. We got to make space before new things can come through. And whenever we start to talk about the Pisces stuff coming in the spring of 2025, dear Lord, not a fan of March. Let's just say it that way. Not a fan of March, not a fan of March for different reasons than a lot of you are going to be expecting, but it's going to be very, very busy and be a lot of things going on. But this right here has something that gives us inklings, some kind of dynamic, some type of preview for what we will be dealing with in March. So put a nice big circle to the 15th, 16th, and 17th, specifically whenever the moon is in Pisces, because it is giving you a glance to something way later. Okay. Moving along. On the 18th, the very next day, the moon, I'm sorry, not the moon, Mercury is going to hit its opposition to Saturn. Now, this actually happens like way earlier, like so right after the full moon perfects, some of this few hours. Yeah. So in the overnight hours after the full moon, Mercury will hit the full opposition to Saturn. And there can be some type of news, something that feeds from whatever happened with the sun's opposition to Saturn, can also feed back to whatever was going on in that full moon in Aquarius. Why do I say that? Because Venus was in an opposition to Saturn during the full moon in Aquarius. So we have previous things that are still feeding into the now. And this has a final decision. This has some type of final information. This has some level of the dynamic that we've changed something, that we're going to go in a certain area. There's something being very much communicated. There's being something that is restructured and replanned that has a larger long-term big picture focus to later. not just in this moment, and it's being presented. It's a final decision, it's a final outcome, or it is, here's the final plans, this is what we're doing, and I'm sticking to it, at least for now. At least for the foreseeable future. And be aware of that. Okay. Okay. We get to the 19th. I know it's bumping by day, and I'll cover some of the days that are going to loop together at the end. On the 19th, Uranus is going to go through a trine with the sun. But not only will we go through a trine with the sun, it's going to start the trine with Uranus. The sun will trine Uranus. The next day, it will hit the full opposition to Neptune. And then the next day after that, it's going to hit the trine to Pluto. So I've got this right here. And you're going to see this chain effect situation of something coming through unexpectedly, dealing with something that we didn't imagine dealing with whenever the sun hits the opposition to Neptune. And then the next day, like the sun hits the trine to Pluto. And it's something from that past energy, something that's reshaping our focus. It's something that about the sidestep, unexpected rules, unexpected layers, unexpected emotions. And during this same time frame, Jupiter is going to go through its square to Mercury. Now, this is actually the most exact on the 21st around 4 a.m. I got it at 10:30, so it's fine. But we still have that square between Jupiter and Mercury. You gave some type of knowledge already. You've given some type of verdict already. You've given some type of lesson already, or you've received it. And now we're in a decision. And for some people, that decision is going to start to make another person hesitate. We've already had this hiccup. We've already had this hiccup. We've already had this thing. So-and-so is out of the office for the unforeseeable future. This is going on. I don't think we need to do anything else. No, we've got to go. We've got to try something else. I don't think we're ready. And what will start to come through also in this middle part of September between the sun square to Jupiter and Mercury square to Jupiter is going to be hesitation. Can we wait? Can we launch it in the spring? Can we do something a little bit different? No, we've got to do it now. We're going to miss our opportunity. We've got to do this before the holidays. We got to get it ready now. I'm not with it. I'm not on the same page as you. I'm not with you on this one. And many of us, people that we care for, support in some way, shape, or form, because they're not wanting to listen and they're being impulsive and impetuous. And you're seeing those little triggers that make you remember stuff from the past. Because sometimes what ends up being like the remembrance of the past is not necessarily the old situation coming back around, but it's like that old dynamic in a new person. I've said this before. And when they start to show those colors that seem a little too familiar and they hit your spine a little much, you're like, I'm not with you. And we can start to feel a hesitancy in some people that we support. We don't believe them the same way. We don't look at them the same way. We're not with this in the same way. And that can come through right around this time too. Okay. Now the exact trine between the sun and Pluto is going to happen on the 22nd at 1:15 a.m. Central Standard Time. And the 22nd is really different. So I'm going to bump now by hour on purpose. So we're going to get to this first. And I want to show this dynamic of just how much change is going to happen all on the 22nd. So just go with me here for just a minute. So first things first, the sun is going to hit the trine to Pluto. That happens the most exact at 1:15 a.m. Central Standard Time. This is 1:15, 2:15. Sorry, I should have wrote 2:15. Here's the sun, 29 degrees, 15 minutes. Here's Pluto, 29 degrees, 44 minutes. You can see sun trine Pluto. At this same time, though, Venus is entering a square with Pluto. So I'm keeping this going. The sun is going to enter Libra. I'm not on the right day. I just noticed that. I'm on the 21st still. Oh, some of you make fun of me. It's fine. You can just make fun of me. All right. Sun trine Pluto. You can see that right there. Venus is also going to enter her square to Pluto. the sun is going to enter Libra right around 7:43 in the morning. And the entire time, Venus is building a square to Pluto. So we have this energy of just like, with the sun's trine, we have the awareness, but with Venus's square, we have a challenge. We have something that is triggering, and there are layers to the triggering. Again, some people are trying to push full steam ahead. They're trying to go in a direction that's full steam ahead. And as they're charging into something, other people are like, I'm not feeling this the same way. And we're bringing up old fears. We're bringing up the old situations, and we're bringing up old dynamics. And this is a challenge in a lot of ways. It can be receptive. Like, I need you to understand you are hitting all of these old wounds that nobody else freaking hits, but you're hitting them. And you're going to force somebody to understand your past. But in other ways, they're not going to understand it at all. And it's going to spiral for some people, something into an old wound, into old triggers. And I need people to be aware of what's going on the 22nd. Okay. So sun trine Pluto at 1:15 a.m. Central Standard Time. The sun enters Libra at 7:43. Around 4 o'clock is whenever Venus will hit the exact square to Pluto. So I got this at 3:30. Here's Venus, 29 degrees, 41 minutes. Here is Pluto, 29 degrees, 43 minutes. And then right after that, by the end of the day, Venus is going to enter Scorpio. And I got this at 10:30 at night. In a 24-hour span, sun trine Pluto, sun changes signs into Libra. Venus square Pluto, Venus changes signs into Scorpio. Now, Venus doesn't do well in Scorpio. Venus is said to be in her detriment in Scorpio. And when we go into the further eclipse that's going to happen on October 2nd, Venus will be in Scorpio. So we have a lot of these things that are triggering more and more to old wounds, old emotions, and old things that we need to deal with. Old secrets, old affairs, this old dynamics. And there's something about the energy of around the 21st, 22nd, the most exact on the 22nd, as I try to show you guys, then I noticed I was on the wrong thing. Dusty is human. Dusty makes mistakes. But the awareness of that old wound, the old trigger, this fearful energy that causes a trigger. And for some people, what's going to happen in these chain effective days is going to be like, we hear some kind of unexpected news. Something is like affecting somebody's body. Something is affecting grandma or grandpa, going with my example in this one, that nobody understands what is happening. And like, it's a boom loss so quick that we didn't have enough time to recover, recoup, or overwhelm something, or overreact to something, or overcorrect something. Like, there's just not enough time, and we have this boom, boom, boom effect. And by the time we get to the 23rd, there's something that is, again, hitting our emotions, taking us into a deeper area. And for some people, we're going to get triggered into something that takes us into a depression. Now, for some of you, whatever happens around this time, it's not going to be a depression per se, but it's going to be, again, that awareness that this new person can hit all of those old buttons and trigger all of those old wounds. And once that awareness sets in, we're like, oh, no, you're not doing this to me. I've lived through this before. I've been in this situation before. I know what this feels like. I know how this is going to go. Hell to the no. We won't be doing this game. And you will start to make a decision to not engage and to not repeat a pattern. For other people, it's like, hey, I've got this, this thing that grandpa had or dad had in this closet, but it's got your name on it. And I don't really want to open it because it feels like it's going to be something that's like really important to you. And you start going through it. And then you realize, again, like going off of that old farmhand example of like the person you thought was your mom was actually your grandma, because the person that you thought was your sister was actually your mom. Like it goes in these layered effects, these rounds of effects. And again, previous truth and previous knowledge that we thought we knew, we're going to realize is not what we thought it was. And that sends you into the spiral of like, oh, wait a minute. That's not what I thought. And you have to take some time to emotionally process that and wrap your head around some things. And there's a lot of, again, old wounds and unfinished business that needs to come through, that needs to be handled. All right, let's continue this. Let's get the month finished out. Oh, Venus does not do well in Scorpio. Mars does not do well in Cancer. Saturn is struggling with the waters of Pisces. Emotions, emotions, emotions. Be aware of that. Sorry. Whew. Okay, moving this along. We're going to get to the 24th. And what's going to happen on the 24th, this is actually going to happen way earlier in the day, around 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, is Uranus is going to go through a trine with Mercury. And the thing is Mercury is going to do exactly what the sun just did on the 22nd, just not with Venus involved. It's just Mercury. So it's like news, 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 information, 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 verdict, 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 outcome, 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 or it's like news, verdict, outcome. There's layers to it. So around lunchtime, Uranus is going to hit that trine to Mercury. When we get to the 25th, so I'm going to start bumping this by hour again. Mercury is going to hit that exact opposition to Neptune. So you can see that right here. Got this. It actually goes exact around 6 a.m. So I got this at 5:30. Here's Mercury in the opposition to Neptune. And then by the end of the 25th, so this, instead of what we had before, now we're doing this all in like a 36-hour span. Not what I wanted to do. By the evening of the 25th, Mercury is going to hit the trine to Pluto. Keeping this going. Okay. That's close enough. So here's the 25th. Here's Mercury, 29 degrees, 38 minutes. Here is Pluto, 29 degrees, 42 minutes. It actually goes exact right before 11:30. So you can see this right here. Something happens a day or two earlier, and not everybody's immediately contacted because, again, whatever happened was like a whirlwind effect of like, we didn't know anything was wrong. Something was happened unexpectedly, this unexpected freak accident. And then we didn't know how to control everything. And then we didn't know what was really affecting us, or we didn't know something was actually wrong deeper inside. We thought he just bumped his head, but come to find out he had a concussion, and then he wouldn't wake up. And then we didn't know what to do, and spiral, spiral, spiral. And then some people are going to literally go through that next round of a spiral, but it's going to be based off of information. And people are going to be arriving to see what has gone on. And again, a lot of people are going to go through things that are going to be triggering a lot of emotions that they didn't know that they needed to deal with, that they didn't know was going to be brought to the surface. Be aware of that. Okay. Oh, on the 26th, so I'll just bump this a couple more hours again. Mercury is going to enter Libra. Now, Mercury is not exalted in Libra, but it's also not in detriment in Libra. Mercury actually does really, it's just okay. Mercury likes being in air signs anyways. But there is some type of news that breaks based off of those recent events. There is some type of acknowledgement that can have more of a public aspect based off of those recent events. And there can be something that is going to take us back to the old, like I said before, or it's going to require us to face something from the old because there's some part of that lesson that we need to bring back into the new. I've given a lot of different examples of how that can come through. I'm sticking with the emotional stuff as I continue through these parts of the transits. Okay. On the 29th, so we get to bump this by day again. Saturn is going to go through a trine with Mars, and we're only going to have one of these. So that'll be a good thing. Getting it to the more exact time span. Okay. So I got this September 29th, 10:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. For some people, this is going to be a part of the 29th. For other people, this is going to be a part of the 30th. But here is Saturn. I'm sorry. Here is Saturn, 14 degrees, 24 minutes. You can see that right here. Here is Mars, 14 degrees, 24 minutes. Saturn is retrograde. Mars is charging ahead. Mars is right now hosting Venus, and Venus is the upcoming ruler of the next eclipse that's going to happen on the 2nd. Something new is going to get instigated. But for us to do the new, we need to understand the actions that we got to take to get past the old dynamic to move away from old traditions, to move away from the old boss, to move away from the old way of doing things, to move away from our elder, to move away from an authority figure. We have to take a certain kind of action. And that action is going to come through somewhere between these last few days of September and the first few days of October. So some of what I'm describing right here might not play out on exactly this. Okay. On the very next day, on the 30th, we're going to have a Mercury cazimi. Now, the moon is in Mercury sign whenever we go through this. So I've got this right here. I'm just going with the 7:30 in the morning. The moon is in Virgo. It's actually going to make an opposition to that Saturn. It's going to hit the sextile to Mars. You can see that right here. But here's Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, the ruler of Virgo, hitting that conjunction to the sun right next to the South Node. And immediately before we actually have an eclipse with that South Node. Something is meant to come to light. Some type of new information, some type of new ideas, some type of new beginning. And for a lot of people, again, this is coming through somewhere between the last few days of September to the first few days of October, because so many of those old emotions have been bringing things around, bringing things to the surface. We need something that helps us find the balance between the old and the new, helps us find the balance to dealing with old triggers while also moving forward in a healthy way by recognizing old bullshit and not letting it affect us. Like, we have this energy of like needing to round into something that creates balance, but a lot of it requires understandings of healing, understandings of the past, understandings of the body, understandings of emotions, understanding of things that are going on with the mothers and the matrons. Pay attention to auntie, grandma, this type of thing. But there is something that needs to come to light, a decision that is being made right around the time of this Mercury cazimi. And this decision immediately impacts the eclipse, because this Mercury cazimi is happening in Libra while the moon is in Virgo. And we have to go through these chain effect things that are going to happen from that mid part of September to the end of September to understand what is going to come to light, this decision that not everybody's going to be aware of. And once this decision comes to light, once the outcome comes to light, once the news gets revealed, debuted, broadcasted, whatever it is, it's also going to lead to the new beginning that will be that new moon in Libra. That again is going to happen on October 2nd. For us to get to that new, we have to have some unexpected things come through in the middle of the month. And I'm so serious when I say expect so many emotions in September. Things that we didn't even know that we needed to process, things that needed to come to the surface. Now, I will say, whenever it comes to the energy following that eclipse, I don't feel like we can get a real good idea of whatever's going to come through in the later part of the month. So that timeline between September 21st and September 26th, until we go through the eclipse. I think we need that. I think that thing that we don't see coming is very, very necessary to be able to make those decisions, to be able to deal with unexpected vibrations, to be able to deal with the side quest or the reshaping or the reframing or the redrawing of the boards. Like, we need something to hit us, and it is going to be rather dumbfounding and confusing to be able to deal with what comes next. Now, I will be clear. I've meditated on this eclipse energy for months, and I like the vibration. I do. Hear me as I'm saying that part, because I like the idea of healing. I like knowing that we can get into deeper levels of healing and finding things that can create new horizons and new ideas. I like the idea of healing the past so that way we don't repeat the patterns, to be better parents to our children. I like that because I feel like it can be very helpful. And we're going to have to make space in many, many ways, especially with that Pisces eclipse, for new energies to come through. And for some people, that new energy is going to have an immediate effect once we get to the end of the month and go into October. But for other people, it's going to be making space again for the things that we're going to be dealing with springtime. And I'm telling you now, March is going to be lit for a whole different set of reasons than the other stuff that I've been talking about. So I'm not going to get into the March stuff, but there's a lot. And we're not going to understand everything in March until we get through the rest of this year. So good Lord, we got stuff to do. As much as there can be progression, there are side steps. There are all of these little things from the past that we need to overcome, that we need to deal with. And not everybody is going to see the overcoming of the side steps at the same time. Some people will see it right at the beginning of the month, whenever Pluto goes back into Capricorn and Uranus turns retrograde. Other people will not see it until the end of the month, whenever we get the Uranus trine to the sun, sun opposite Neptune, sun trine Pluto, and then the next one with Mercury doing the exact same thing all over again, and Venus is square to Pluto. Some of us are not going to see it until then, because whatever has gone on, it wasn't on your plate. It wasn't for you to deal with. Somebody else was in charge. You're not in charge of grandpa full-time. The nurse is. The doctors are. They're in a nursing home. And you have no idea the levels of things that are going on until we get to later, until they hit a certain point, and the place has no choice but to contact you and say, hey, we need to look at this. You need to come in. You need to make these decisions. Something. What? There will be some unexpected things that come through, but they're not going to be like the Mercury retrograde stuff. And they will allow for us to progress in a multitude of different ways and go in this new direction. But there will be side steps. There will be revisiting of the plans of what we thought were going to make sense of. And some people, what the things that you tried to do earlier this year, or disruptions that you would have had from earlier in the year, are going to finally come to a peak, and you're going to be able to go in a different direction that are months in the making. And that, again, is going to be some part of what's happening with late September and going into October. For some people, it is going to be a very drastic undoing. And that will be our own karma, if that is the case. Not caring for things the same way, not being responsible for the same things, because people don't have the same confidence in you. And you are going to get removed from power, and you will no longer be in charge of certain things. And you will have to go back to the drawing board in a way that you never anticipated, because you let your ego get to your head. The thing about an eclipse that's going to be closer to the south node, there's no ego when it comes to the body. The ego is attached here. It's attached to the head. If we take the head away, north node, if we remove the head from the body, there is no ego. There's humbling. There's understanding what needs to be reduced, removed, let go of, outgrow. And many of us are going to get to a point that we see the potential of growth and what we have to leave behind. And it is going to be necessary, because, again, we have to do things to make space for what's going to come later, for where the gains are going to be later. For a lot of people, later is March. Okay. I love and appreciate every single one of you. This is going to come out in the last part of August, of course, and then there's going to be some back-to-back videos because we got the week ahead, and then the way we start the new week is also going to be the new moon in Virgo. So hit me up with questions, hit me up with concerns. My contact information is listed in the description of every single episode. I'm not running a special for September, again, like I said, so but I am still hosting Zooms and everything else. The idea is, like, we've got some restructuring and planning that needs to be done. I got to go back to the drawing board in a multitude of ways. For some of us, it's going to be a good thing. For others, it's going to be kind of a pain in the ass. Anyways, I love and appreciate every single one of you. I will talk to everybody very, very soon. Subscribe.